So before we do the really obvious problem of the head, that's going to be a different process of like edge extending. I'm just going to target this area because it's a little bit easier to get. So we'll start with this one, and I'm going to use my edge, easy edge tool. So again, you can find these at the top of the script if you don't have them. Also at the top of your script over here. Let me just make this whole asset thing the same. So we can easily find if you need anything. And all right, so I'll plug in the easy edge. You can either plug it directly in the alpha or you can plug it into here because it's already being copied in, so it doesn't matter. And I'm going to try to target this white edge. So if I take a look at this, it might be easier to pre-multiply this picture as we look at it. And if we look at the edge, we can try to sort of line it up there. So we can make this smaller. I'm going to hit the detailed inner edge because that gives us a different shape. And sort of go like this. And I'm going to expand it a little bit outward like that. So we kind of just get the edge. And we'll just put a grade here. And I'll put the pre-mult after like this. So the pre-mult's just on the side so I can kind of tell what's happening. So we have this and we have this. And so now if I take the grade and I start darkening, we can start to take care of those edges. So I'm going to just play around with the size to try to get as much of it as I can. And then, yeah, blur it a little bit. So the grain, we're going to be kind of not using most of this plate grain anyway because I'll talk about it at the end. But if you reposition a picture, it pretty much blurs all the grain. So, you know, reposition is not something that happens really in the camera. It's not physically accurate, but you kind of destroy the grain a little bit when you do these things. So what we're going to do actually is sort of have our denoise plugged into here. So I'm going to disable this one so that we have only one. So it's kind of like what we did last time where we just wanted to denoise all things. Sometimes you only need to denoise one way, but because we're doing so much edge extensions and everything like that, sometimes you can keep the grain in the center of your footage the same way we key mix despills. You know, you have a core and an outside. You can do the same thing with grain. You can have a CG grain on the edge and have the real grain on the center if you're doing too much color correction. But in our case, because we are sort of repositioning our picture, you know, that kind of destroys the grain. So we're just going to put fake grain at the end, basically. So I'm going to put the denoise here instead and continue forward with that. And so, yeah, let's just see. Well, let's just also see how much detail we're losing with the grain, because we might be able to do something if it's too much detail. Yeah, I think it'll be okay. It's a pretty dark shot anyway, so you know, this is not the best reduced grain kind of node, but you know, that's what we had to work with. So okay, sorry for the tangent there, but it is kind of relevant because we're looking at the edges here and trying to see how it looks. So let's look at this over background and see if we're doing too much. I have a feeling that this is going to be too much, but so it's doing pretty good. Usually we want to check by gaining up. You see, like if we're just at this exposure, you can't even tell really. It looks good there, but you want to always gain up to make sure. So on the very edge, it's doing pretty good, but when it goes over to our area that wasn't over the pole, it looks a little bit too much. So what you can do is just take a roto, and because we're before the reformat and all that stuff, we need the 4K node, and we'll plug it into the background of this thing and mask it. So we're just masking that edge mat to that specific area. So if I do that and I look at the actual alpha, you see we're just getting an edge mat of one area, and then we'll just blur that out. So I'm holding E and it will kind of expand that feather. So now I can control exactly where that effect is going to happen. And let's just see. Okay, so I'm going to animate this to sort of match. And it's a little bit dark on this edge, so it's a little bit too dark. So normally what I like to do with these edges is sometimes I'll darken it a little bit too far, and then I will lift. So I'll put another node, and I'll put a lift, and select the color, like the darkest color right next to it. And that gives a really good blend. So it won't go darker than the darkest thing in that area. So that's a good way to kind of do that. And you can mix the lift back a little bit if you have to. So I'll keep it actually where it was though. And then I'm just gonna kind of adjust the feather. So that, oops, make sure not to select a different color there. Close all that. Make sure I just have my roto open, and then sort of, I'm just gonna expand that to try to get as much of those white edges as I can. So wherever it works, it works. So I'll just sort of eyeball it and see. You know, in some areas this lift thing is not doing the best, so let me just take it down. Maybe it's just too much lift thing that I did there. But yeah, that's looking pretty good. So now we got all that detail. It's not too dark, not too bright, and it feels pretty blended. And that's pretty much just with a little edge detect and a roto shape. So we can go to the end here and sort of, if I disable and enable, it's looking pretty good. And you see that we're not getting the problem areas over here. Like that's not, you know, that's a little bit too dark. So we're keeping some of the detail, just keeping this where it needs to be. So here's an area that, for example, you know, it's getting a little bit too dark, but maybe our dynamic despill, you see our dynamic despill later on might actually help with that. So that's why the dynamic despill can come at the end. You know, it's a little bit too much there, but here it's kind of solving it. And that's why we're going to enable that at the end. If there's a couple little areas that are just very slightly off, you know, we can always go back and tweak, but the dynamic despill is kind of that's why I like to put it at the end, because I don't like to rely on it too much. But it definitely can help, like areas like here, you know, maybe not even eroding it, but just plussing it on like that. You got to be careful as well. You can see that some of our alpha appears a little bit semi-transparent here. So that's somewhere you need to go back and fix your alpha. Because if you're seeing your image coming through there, that means that our alpha is a little bit semi-transparent. But here it's doing good. You see like how it's a little bit dark, and it kind of just gives you that extra level of detail. And here it needs a little bit of an erode. So that's what I'm saying. It doesn't work perfectly all the way around. So everything requires a little bit of like rotoscoping. I'm going to keep this off for now, the dynamic despill, because I really want to do it the proper way before we just kind of do a dynamic despill all the way around. Because I'm going to have to kind of roto that in different areas if that's the case. So I'm going to start doing the head now. So I'll do a edge detect, edge push. So this is the node I created. I'm going to do it on the non-motion blurred version. So you see I'm still before our little transformation. Let me just put a backdrop around that so we can see it better. Reposition. So yeah, let's just do that, and we'll start taking care of this line around the head. I'm going to try to do this side first. I think that we're going to have to treat them a little bit differently, because if I look at the start, you know, it's sometimes there's white and sometimes there's not. So sort of towards the end, you see like it goes a little bit dark there. So you might need to kind of rotoscope on and off where it's appearing. So I'm going to just do this side first and sort of put this to 0. Okay, so first I'm going to start with outside push and inside push, and then control where that edge goes. So I'm going to turn off the blur for now. It's easier to figure out where this is supposed to go by not having a blur. So you turn the blur off, and then you just make sure you have some inside push and then outside push, and you'll get like a thickness. So you can see exactly where we're going with this. So something like this, but we want to make sure that it's pulling this color here. So let me just make sure that this is working properly. Yeah, so we just want to go right on the edge of where we're getting that color. So you see I had to play around with it a little bit, but if it's too far in, we're getting too dark of a color, whereas the edge is a little bit brighter. And I don't want to push this effect really far in on his face. I really just want it on the edge. So something like that probably work. And we can key mix that onto the image. So we'll put it in. Make sure you switch it to RGB because we're after this thing. We don't want to mess up the alpha or anything. And we'll just key mix that in with a shape. So we'll just draw it over where the white is. Like that. And we might have to do two techniques to fix this. We might have to do like the edge extend and then a darkening. Because you see like we have a really bright halo around his face. But I don't want to just edge extend in until it turns dark, because then we're going to lose all of his face. You know, so if I start pushing this in, for example, if I start pushing this in too far, you start to get like stretching from his face. So we don't want that. We will do a color correction. So I'm going to push the edge out a little bit further because it doesn't matter what's outside. We're just trying to get rid of it. So like that. And then maybe we'll blur it a little bit so that it kind of blurs. We don't get a hard edge. So we can do it inside edge blur to get like a soft edge. And just take a look at the final image. So that's looking pretty good. At least we've gotten rid of the white edge. And then it'll be easier later to solve this, like I said, with a color correction rather than trying to edge extend in to get a dark color and pushing out, because we lose all detail that way. So I'm going to rotoscope this through. I'm going to sort of feather that out as well. And just, you know, that might work all the way around this whole top area. We'll see. Usually you got to be careful with putting it too far, but we'll see how well it works. It looks like it's working quite well. So some areas here that are going to be problematic. This is the worst part of rotoscoping and keying, is like stuff like this, where like the ear and the edge cross, and then it's not in the key, so you get this like little hole. That's really the really tricky stuff. Because you know, you're trying to erode it and stuff like that. It's always a hassle. So we'll just keep going. So here, for example, it's not enough on this area, so we'll have to do something different there. But we'll just keep going through. And it seems to be doing okay with the rope even passing across, so that's good. It's not doing too bad of a job even with the rope. There's no weird stuff around the edges. But stuff like this is, so this is a tricky area again. So you see it's not doing an edge detect because there's an object passing. So it's not getting rid of that little white dot. So as this passes over, we might get a little thing that we need to paint. So that's tricky stuff. So our character's sort of out of focus here at this point anyway, because we have this little fake defocus that we're doing. So that helps. And we also have like the animation, which is kind of giving it motion blur. So those two things help a little bit with the key as well, to have complex sort of movements. So here again, it's not working completely. So this is why, you Usually you want to do each side independently. Even here, maybe might be, at least it's giving us something better though, so that's a start. So we'll put this in a backdrop and call it edge extend screen right face. And this one is, what was this? Sort of darken screen right shoulder. Especially with the darkens though, you got to be careful. You don't want to push the blacks beyond what they actually are. That's why you see whenever I'm working, I'm really gaining up here to check. You know, I don't want a super black edge here because nothing on this person is that dark. So you want to keep the values in relation to the plate. Let's just continue. Okay, so we'll continue on. I'll just keep doing it in this video. Try to tackle a little bit of this edge here. So this, you know, could try an edge extend here. Just want to see how much of this is, if we go back. Yeah, I'm just looking at, yeah, this edge extend doesn't go in quite far enough, so we'll just try another one. So I'll just kind of branch it off like that, make a separate variation of the same one, and then just sort of reduce that number a little bit. So we're just kind of pushing that in, and that'll work. Just key mix that. Put a roto, and just key mix this over the top, so we get a little bit of a darker one there. That could be also a color correction, but we'll just try this as a quick solution. So that works decently. This little crack area, we're gonna have to do something probably specific to fix it. And this stuff, I think I'm gonna do yeah, definitely a grade. Will work there. Okay, so you see here, here's an example of where edge extend is going too far. So you see when I have this edge extend and when I don't have it, I actually have more detail. So this one's pushing too far and I'm losing a little bit of our inner ear lobe. So this is what I was talking about earlier, is like if you push things too far, you start to lose the actual footage. So I'm gonna keep it off on that frame. And then when there's more motion blur, so basically that edge is thicker, then I'll bring it back on. So that's why the edge extend doesn't, you can't just always keep it everywhere, because sometimes the edge becomes thicker or thinner based on the amount that it's moving. So this edge extend I've kind of set up here works a little bit when it's moving, but if it's static, it's kind of pushing in too far. So I'll just basically go through and do it like this. And again, it doesn't seem to be doing anything bad here, so I don't mind that it's going over the rope, even though it's not designed for that area. It seems to be kind of helping it anyways. And yeah, that's pretty good for the head. Let's just go through, zoom back out. He's way too lifted still in terms of composite, but for the edges, we're getting there. Let's go ahead and just knock this down a little bit as well, so we can start to go in there with a little edge detect. So not the edge push, but the edge, easy edge. So that will just give us the alpha. And I guess I'll expand this down a little bit so we can keep this clean. And we'll just try to get that edge. So this is the area that we're working. So I'm going to do a pre-multiply just so I can see it. And take this edge thing and mask it by a roto. So A mask B. Make sure you have this thing plugged in as long as you're before the transform, because we're still working in 4K. And then we'll just go there and darken that. So bring it down a little bit and maybe make this alpha a little bit bigger. So if we take a look at the alpha, we could maybe expand it in and kind of blur it. So we could do like a soft blur and kind of darken inwards. I can adjust where that's falling. So that's going to be way too much, but we'll just try it and see. All right, let's just see what that looks like over the background. It's going to be way too much, but let's just, yeah. So really, we're going to try to keep him sort of lifted like this. We're not going to do integration yet. We're just trying to get rid of any halos and stuff like that. So I'm not integrating him. I'm not darkening to match yet. I'm just trying to get this all neutral and sort of working together. And this is going too dark, because if you gain up and you see how this is darker than everything else. Like this is lighter, and then this is like super dark. So what you could do is just reduce it, or you could kind of reduce it and then do that little lift thing I showed you. So you could kind of lift it back up to this area. Might be too much, but let's just. So if we disable, enable, sort of trying to get rid of that halo. We might have to do a really thin correction right here. I don't know if I can get that with one swipe. And then I'm going to fade this off a bit as well, because, oops, let me just make sure. These little things can mess up your colors if you do it. So let's just try to, yeah, this is still a little bit too dark, but. So maybe just back it off a tiny bit, something like that. So you see the difference. Like we're not crunching it. We're not doing this, or we're pushing it really, really black. We're just trying to get it in the same tones as the center of the picture. Later on, when we have our grading, so when we have grades like this, that's when we're going to do this to make it really push in together. But you see, if we over darken this edge and then we do our grades, we're going to get a broken part of the image, and your image isn't going to look good. So that's why we neutralize first, take care of the edges first, and then do grading at the very end and integration at the very end. So I'll just animate that through, and then we'll continue on with this, the other areas. So that's doing a pretty good job. I mean, this part of the image is almost kind of damaged anyway, because there's like almost a glow coming from the light. And yeah, that's you can't really restore detail if there's, if you really lost detail in of a glowing plate, like if there's a glow going over something, it sort of flattens the image, so you kind of lose detail. And there's not a lot of ways to like restore that detail because it's not in the original image. I mean, you could like paint it in or patch it in or something if you needed more detail than the original picture, but usually that's not what usually you're not gonna have time to do something like that. So the best you can do is really just try to get it in the same realm. So here it's affecting our band as it goes over, but again, that might not be good because actually we're starting to get a little bit of dark edge around. So we might need to have a counter roto to kind of say don't apply this color correction there, but I don't know if it's that noticeable, but so we'll just continue through for now. So I'm just kind of pushing the shape. I kind of animate the shape around to make sure that, you know, if you need a little bit less, you can just move it back. If you need a little bit more, you can just move it on top more. So that's the nice thing about the rotos is like you can, as the shot's moving and changing, you can sort of adjust the intensity as necessary. Might even just add another shape here just to see. Yeah, that might just help a little bit. So if we just like bring a really feathered shape just for this area, might just help knock down that little halo that's appearing there. So we're using the same color correction, we're just adding another shape. And then just I can keep it very much on the edge. Same for here even. The same color correction might be pretty good. So we'll just feather it out and then push it on until it sort of at least reduce that area. So we might need to adjust that a little bit, but we'll see once we get to different part. So you see that area actually disappeared at the end. So now I don't even need this shape. So I can just keep it up here somewhere and don't even need to use it. It might be smart to kind of move this out of the way actually, because if something comes swinging through, we don't want it to color correct that area. Okay, so let's just, yeah, I think it's pretty good for this video. I'm sure the video is already pretty long, but now our head is starting to look really good. It's starting to get at least all the problems removed. If we just compare, like we just disable, we've really repaired a lot of this image. So, and we can even compare with all the despill. If we just disable the despill, you know, so we've done all of this so far. So it's starting to really start to feel like he's in there a little bit. And once we get our integration colors in there as well, it's going to help a lot, and then we'll be pretty much done. But yeah, we'll keep working through. This is the walkthrough part, so I'll keep just showing you what I'm doing. Do this part next, and the belt, which will be the hardest part of this comp in terms of despilling it.